All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Healedish. I am here with Sam today, and this is so exciting because I know Sam from my crazy Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry days. So if you know the lore of the Christian Hogwarts school that I went to, we were actually even in the same small group at the time. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Jubilee. This is so exciting and so fun to reconnect after all this time.
I know. I can't wait to hear what your experience was like at Bethel, because I'm sure everybody had vastly different stories. But one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on is you are now a trauma therapist who works with religious trauma. So I'm really excited to talk about that when we get more towards the end, because I think we all need therapy after everything that we went through there. But yeah, do you want to get us started and just talk about what it was like? Were you raised in the church, and how did you end up getting involved with JH Ranch?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I am excited to connect back in the trauma piece and the work that I do now at the end. But starting at the beginning, I was raised in Southern California, North San Diego County, in a Christian home. And it was very I'd say we're casual Christians, very surf town. We went to a Calvary Chapel, which I don't know if Calvary Chapel is as big outside of Southern California because it started out here.
I haven't heard of it.
But it was founded by Chuck Smith in the 70s. And it was the church that hippies were accepted at back then. So you could wear your flip-flops and your shorts to church, and they played acoustic guitar. And so, in the 90s when I was growing up, it was very much the cool church to go to, not in the sense of necessarily the lights and the sound machine, but more just the vibes, very community oriented. And yeah, you could wear casual clothes. It didn't feel like high church. And I think that attracted my parents, who grew up in more Episcopalian, Anglican, these more what my dad would say is bells and smells type denominations. So they were drawn more to the chill evangelical surfer vibes of our church. And yeah, I'd say my experience of growing up in the church as a kid was really positive. Went to Sunday school, but as soon as we were old enough to sit still for an hour, my parents wanted us to come to big church. So we'd hear the sermons, and then we'd talk about it as a family. And my dad's a PhD scientist, so I felt we got a good modeling of how to think deeply about God, but also how to think critically. Were there parts of the sermon you didn't understand or didn't like? And so as a family, it wasn't just whatever the pastor said goes. We would have conversations about it, but we'd also have conversations about science and about literature. And I felt growing up, church felt just a part of life versus all of life. Right.
Yeah, that's so refreshing. That is so refreshing that he was fine with you asking questions and encouraged it afterwards to talk about it as a family. Because I do feel sometimes you go to church, and even in my family, I feel we could, or at least me and my siblings, we would hear something and we'd be and you feel some level of discomfort if you don't agree with what the pastor has said, but we all kind of just shove those down.
Right. So as far as the intellectual, theological part of church, I'd say there was critical thinking, there was discussion, but there were some areas where my parents, because they weren't raised in that type of way or felt they weren't equipped as parents, that kind of got outsourced to the church. So one of these things was around sexuality and sexual development. They were we'll just let the church handle that. We're not going to touch it, because they had their own shame stories from their experience. And so I'd say those were some things that since then, being an adult, I've had conversations with them about hey, this was harmful because you just kind of gave these pieces of really parenting away to the church because they must know what they're doing. And that's actually where my sister and I both experienced some harm was in those ways, which we can get into.
Yes. And I feel what's funny for me is I feel I grew up heavy in purity culture, but it really was also from the church, kind of what you were saying. My parents had a more yeah, like the church would teach us, kind of thing. So I think maybe even my rules for myself were stricter than even what my parents would have put on me.
Yeah.
Like, sure, yes, they believed in waiting, but I think not to the degree that I was receiving it at church. So a lot of the harm really came from the church's view of purity and not from my parents.
Yeah, I think that
which
like
was
resonates so much, and I've really seen the kind of discrepancy between me and my husband in that, because he grew up in the church, but it was like a, you know, don't have sex before you're married, but you probably will. So like you can ask for forgiveness and there's grace and like it's okay, it's normal to explore, but like don't try to do it. And I'm like, wow, that was so not the message that I got in purity culture.
That's the same with Brandon.
Yeah.
That's what he was taught growing up too. He was like, wow, y'all talked about it that much? Like maybe they talked about it once, because he was raised Catholic, and it just wasn't, it was like, well, just say you're sorry. Like, you know, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
So what was purity culture like? What messaging were you getting at the time?
Yeah, so I'd say my first introduction really to purity culture was at J.H. Ranch. So we can get into kind of how I ended up there. So I think it was summer of 6th grade. My sister and my dad got invited by some friends to go to this camp in Northern California. That was like a father-daughter camp. And so they went and came back and like told us the stories, had a great time. My sister was a senior in high school at the time, so she was like a little old, but it was like kind of the, before you go to college, I want this experience with you. So they come back and they show us this DVD that every family got after their experience. And, you know, it's horseback riding. There's B-roll of like the horses running through a field, like parents and kids going down rapids in a yellow whitewater raft and rock climbing. And I was just, I mean, for me being this like little surfer adventurous girl, it was like catnip. I was like, when can I go? Sign me up. I'm going. Like, couldn't wait. And my dad, I was like 12 at the time. My dad's like, you got to wait till you're 14. You're not quite old enough. And I just remember being like, oh, that is the ticket. Like, that's what I want. And, you know, at the time, my dad was really important to me because, you know, he had 2 girls. So I was kind of like the son he never had. I was more into sports and like I was playing volleyball and ended up having like this whole volleyball career and played in college. So just to give you context, but like that was kind of the beginning of like, oh, wow, Sam's an athlete. And like my dad played football in college. So it was very much like, you know, the son he never had. Whereas my sister was more the creative, you know, tennis player. That was like the most sports she did, like solo introvert. So anyways, I felt like that my relationship with my dad was a big motivator for J.H. Ranch, because it was like, wow, I get a whole week, just me and him getting to like,
that is so sweet,
be in the mountains and play. And it's like, we get to talk about God, which I really enjoyed God as a kid. Like, you know, I felt like had good scaffolding, like we talked about from my family, of like, this is a safe, good thing, like topic and experience in your life. So summer before my freshman year of high school, we go to J.H. Ranch and just had a blast. Like all the vibes, all the things I was excited for happened. Great memories. Like I was in a cabin full
What did you guys do? Was it sermons, like worship, and then just also a lot of activities, or what did it look like?
Yeah, so during the day, it's mostly activities. So they kind of, you get like a little notebook when you get there that has a lot of their like programming. So like, so in the mornings you have like solo time or like quiet time with your dad where you like go through some questions, and that's like right after breakfast. And this is all like before a lot of places were doing this, like technology free, like you don't have cell service. They like take your phones away. So it was like intentional time, just you and your dad, really. So we'd have this time in the morning, and then we'd go on whatever activity, whether it was like the ropes courses that they had, horseback riding, mountain biking, whitewater rafting. So you're doing that all day, you know, with lunch in between. And then after dinner at night, we would go to what's called the Big Top, because they have this big white circus tent on their camp property, which I'm sure you've seen.
Did we go there?
Yeah.
Did we go there? Okay. Yeah. So one thing y'all need to know is that Bethel is kind of affiliated, we'll get into it, with J.H. Ranch. So the Bethel students, we all went to J.H. Ranch to do a little retreat. So I do remember the tent. And this is when Oceans came out. Do you remember that worship
Yeah.
song? So I have this vivid memory of like a fire tunnel breaking out and Oceans was on and it was in the tent. So.
And you know what it looks like. It's in this gorgeous valley. I mean, walking up to the tent, it's just like picturesque Northern California mountains with like deer and horses and daisies blooming, like just beautiful. So at night we would have these like sermons and worship in what was called Big Top, in this big tent. And a lot of them were like based around the idea of this is how you be a godly person. And so a lot of JH Ranch kind of content programming was around character building, but like in a, you know, I'll use air quotes, biblical way. And a big piece of that was like, there was so many little like catchphrases. I'm like pulling from the recesses of my memory to remember them. But one was like, you only live life once, but if you live it right, once is enough, which I think is actually like a Confucius quote that Bruce, who was like
they're like, we will take this.
Yeah, he just like co-opted and was like, I like this. It's catchy. And there were other ones around like, don't be a good person, be a godly person. And the same for like, don't marry a good person, marry a godly person, which had a lot to do with like character. Yeah, you fall in love with personality, but you marry the character, those kind of things, which some of these things are like very true still, but it had this like underlying layer of godliness, of like spiritual purity, really. So it was like the sexual purity piece, but there was also a spiritual purity piece.
Oh yeah, they had the different phrases. So not just being physically pure, but spiritually pure. And I feel like that was a very big thing at Bethel as well, like having a very high moral character. It's very much how I viewed Bill Johnson, was just this very wise character.
Yeah. So you're getting this content, and then at the same time, so you have all these amazing experiences. You're having this intentional quality time with your dad that like maybe you've never had before. You know, for me, we had like a pretty good relationship going in, but I know there was lots of kids. This is like the first time they're really sitting down and getting this time with their parent. And then the other kind of like, I think aspect that really hooked me was all the summer staff were these, so the people who own JH Ranch are from Alabama. So all the staff was mainly like from the south of the United States. And so Alabama, Georgia, Florida, those places.
I wonder why. Like, why are they in Northern California?
It's like his dad. He inherited it from his dad who bought it back in the day. But they were originally from San Diego and then moved out to Alabama. So that was kind of like how we heard about them. They'd come to my high school and share about the ranch. But also I'll like use the ranch, JH. It's all JH Ranch. There's different just ways we colloquially will talk about it. So there's all these college students from like Alabama, Auburn, University of Georgia, who most of them are well off. Most of them are beautiful, in shape. So you like see all these like gorgeous people who are just like so on fire for God. Like they are not getting paid. They gave up their whole summer to be there. And so the whole time you're like hearing these sermons about being a godly person, having this character, being pure, and then you're seeing these tan, hot, godly 20-year-olds.
Picture perfect of what you could ever want to be.
Yeah, so you're like, you see the girls, you're like, that's who I want to be. You see the guys, you're like, that's who I want to marry. So there's just kind of this almost like propaganda for like being a godly person, being a godly young person when you're there, you know, I was there at 14. And so we had this great time. The whole time kind of culminates in the last day we're there. We don't have any activities in the morning, and the dads all meet before breakfast and get kind of their orientation. And then we go off property. We drove to like a trailhead. We did a little hike, and we hiked to this waterfall. And now looking back on it, it's like, it feels like a proposal. It feels like grooming for a proposal, which is wild.
Yeah.
But it's like this.
Well, that's so common. I've heard so many comments that I read. It's like there's this very strange vibe going on that you are married to your dad until you marry your spouse, and lots of like rituals, the rings. I had somebody, she did an entire ritual with her dad and he presented her with a purity ring. It's just very interesting.
So that's what's coming.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So we go
Spoiler alert.
So we go to this waterfall. We hiked to this waterfall. We sit down, he has a blanket. We sit down, which very proposal vibes. And he gives me this stack of letters. So like my mom wrote a letter, my volleyball coach at the time, who was like really influential in my life, my best friend, another mentor. So it's like all these people in my life just telling me like how amazing they think I am, how proud they are of me, like really beautiful. I mean, as a 14-year-old, like, wow, getting words of affirmation from friends and mentors, parents was amazing. And then it kind of leads up to a conversation about sexual purity and a printed out contract for me to sign, promising to remain sexually pure until I get married and promising it to God and my dad. And we like both signed it. And then that was the point. He'd like present me with a ring. He didn't have one for me, but he's like, when we get back home, you can pick one out, which for me, being a little like style girl, I was like, hell yeah. Like, that's like,
you're like, this is great. You just showered me with so much love and affection, and now I get jewelry.
Yeah. And we have like this special hike and all this memory of this week. Like, of course I'll sign on the dotted line. Like, I don't know, for me at 14, I know some people are more like aware of their sexual drive younger. For me, I was like, I like barely have crushes on boys. Like I'm, I was like, sex, ew. Like I was still very much like, I remember I cried when I got my period because it felt like the end of childhood. I was so sad. So like, you
were just like secure in yourself. It feels like you're just like, I'm just well adjusted. I like being a kid.
Yeah, I was like, not having sex, great. Like I'm not thinking about it. I don't care. Not realizing like the impact that would have in my development. So
do you feel like that retreat was meant for that ending at the picnic thing? Like, was the retreat the purpose to get their daughters to sign this purity contract?
I mean, looking back on
it was just an aspect.
It felt like the climax. It felt like the whole week has been building to this. And I think in a way it was, in the sense that like, I don't think they're like, haha, we're going to get all these girls here and sign contracts. But I think sexual purity was put on such a pedestal that like I think the selling point for these dads was like, hey, get your daughters here, and have this great experience with them so you can have a good relationship. And so like they will be protected from sexual sin, from marrying the wrong person, from, there's like lots of motivators why parents could be convinced to do this.
Well, and they're also, the kids are riding this high of, well, we just had so much fun, we're so connected, and now I'm getting all of these love letters. It kind of like sets you up to respond well to this talk, rather than like if a parent just knocked on your bedroom door and said, you better stay pure. It feels like this is very much done in love, because you care about my moral character.
Right. And for me, like in our family, sex was we don't talk about it issue. So like the only sex education I had from my parents was like talking about, hey, you're going to get a period. It's just so you know what happens in case you have blood in your underwear. Like, don't freak out. You're not dying.
Well, at least you got that. Some people don't even get that.
And two, this conversation with my dad. So that was like it. And so, in this like taboo topic, of course I'm like, yeah, sure, there's like part of me that's placating, like, yeah, I want to stop talking about this, and also like, this is what you want from me, you're giving me a ring and this great week, cool, yeah, I'll sign. So yeah, didn't think much of it at the time, and I like got to design my own ring. I think it was like a 2-carat blue topaz they got me. I mean, girls got like literal engagement rings, like David Yurman rings. Like, it just shows you the type of families coming to JH. Like it was wealthy families. And so, of course, I wore it on my left ring finger. Like, people would ask me in high school if I was engaged, and like, I'm like, no, it's a purity ring. Like, I was like so proud of it. I designed it.
You're like, don't you know?
And people would look at, like, I played club volleyball. I was on the junior Olympic team. Like, I traveled all over, not around Christian people who would get it. And I was like, yeah, duh, it's a purity ring.
Did you keep the purity contract?
So I'm like, oh, I didn't know we were going to actually have that question. So the funny thing is, I wore that ring through college. I'm trying to remember how old I was, but I was working at the ranch. I was loading bikes on a trailer, and the ring literally broke off my finger. And I thought it was a sign from God that I was released from the contract. But I was probably like in my 20s.
I'm obsessed.
I was probably in my 20s. Like, I had been disillusioned and was like, eh. But I did
I love that you thought that that was from God.
Yeah.
You know?
I was like, well, I think that was like Bethel days where I was like, it's a sign.
Everything's a sign, everything. Oh my gosh.
But
so you just wanted to join JH after that. So like after you see all these very cool kids who seem like they have all their life together, was it kind of in your mind that once I graduate high school that I want to go and do that?
Yeah. So I continued to go. They had like high school programs as well. So I continued to go through high school, loved it. And then went on staff like at the minute I graduated. This is like the funniest story. I actually missed my high school, walking in my high school graduation to be at JH Ranch because I wanted to be there so bad. And I guess like schools in California finish later than schools in the South. So I was like, I finished my finals. I don't care about walking. I'm just going to leave, which I have a master's degree. The 2 out of my 3 graduations, I've only been to 1 because I graduated grad school in June 2020. So I had a Zoom graduation. But I'm
like, of course.
It's laughable. Like, but that was how committed I was to JH, to, you know, this is really the formula to be a godly person is like, now I get to go serve on staff. And that's like the dream, is to be one of the summer staff members, you know, to volunteer my summer, not get paid, work really hard. I mean, Bruce would always say you can sleep in September. And I'm like, does he realize we're college students? We can't sleep in September. Like, we're here all summer working really hard.
Wow, not getting paid. That's crazy.
But it was godly,
because I'm sure you're
right?
working constantly. Yes.
Yeah.
Because you're supposed to be poor. No, I remember feeling like, I don't know if you had heard, but like Sean Foyt was my landlord out in Pennsylvania, and he wouldn't fix our heat. And I was like suffering on an air mattress on the floor, could see my breath in the apartment or the house. And you get this complex where you're like, I'm suffering for God, and that's really holy.
Oh yeah.
You know?
And like,
so
my first
I'm
summer,
exhausted, but I'm doing something right.
Right. And my first summer on staff, I think we had like, I want to say like 18 or 20 girls in like a trailer in bunk beds, like a double wide trailer. And there were like cockroaches and rats, and they were like, oh, the city won't give us permits to build like permanent staff housing, so we'll just put you guys in trailers. So, but we were living there for like 4 months. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah, just it gets like into the hundreds in Northern California in the summer, you know, barely. We just had like one little wall mounted AC in the living room, and honestly, a lot of girls would just sleep outside, just like bring their mattresses out to the deck because it was cooler to sleep outside.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah.
That's so inhumane. But it's like, I'm suffering, I'm doing it,
right.
You know?
And like, it's just, I think that's where like the cult like mentality comes in, is like, I'm a part of it. I'm a part of the thing. I'm here.
The vision.
Like, yeah. And so I think being on staff is where you really got to see behind the curtain into like more of the charismatic part of JH. So like a lot of the campers and guests came from pretty conservative backgrounds. So, you know, maybe there'd be, you know, you mentioned like the fire tunnel in Big Top. It's like that was not happening when the campers were there. Like that was after season when it was just Bethel. But like when campers were there, you'd maybe like pray for someone for healing or prophecy, but it was like kind of hush hush, you know. But the staff was always seen as like so on fire, so spiritual. And so when you're on staff, that's when Bruce was the owner of the camp. His wife, Heather, kind of mentored the staff. And she was like she self-proclaimed herself a prophet and an intercessor. For those of you who don't know what an intercessor is, it's like a prayer warrior, like does like the spiritual warfare, you know, prophetic acts, like pouring wine on the land because it's the blood of Jesus, and like just so.
I love a good prophetic act. I remember in the healing rooms, they would like, someone took off their belt and they were like, we have to jump over this belt because it's a challenge and you're going to be healed if you jump over the belt, you know. And there's lots of prophetic movements that people think you need to do to get to the next layer,
the breakthrough that you're
spirituality.
praying for. Yeah. So like I met Heather my first summer on staff, and I also met her like intercessor team. And so this was, I think it was 2008, but it's when the Lakeland revival in Lakeland, Florida was happening. I don't know if you heard about that, but it was like televised. So I don't know when Bethel started televising things, but this was like, from what I remember, like the first like televised revival where you could like watch it on your computer. And so I would go I was just like so like desperate for more of God and like hungry for God. And so I would go pray with the intercessors, and then they'd like put on the Lakeland revival. And that was the first time I had heard about like being slain in the spirit or praying for healing or prophecy. And so I was like very curious and wanting to learn more. And so they were like, well, we can pray for you to like receive these gifts. And I was like, oh, I was raised like just thinking God just decided who got them. And like some people got picked and some didn't. And like, that's fine. But I didn't know like you could just ask for them. That was mind blowing. So I got prayed for to receive tongues and prophecy and healing that first summer, and like got them and started like using those gifts. And there was
Did it feel genuine to you at the time?
At the time, 100%. Yeah. I was like, this is what I've been waiting for. Like when I've been saying like, I want more of God for years, this is it. Like, this is the thing. Now what I understand about myself is like, I love spiritual ascent. I love disassociating into like fantasy land. Like it's part of how I cope with trauma in life. And so like that, I think it was like that part of me too. And I think there's, you know, I totally believe in like a spiritual reality and like energy, and when humans have the same intention in a group together, things happen that we can't 100%. See and feel. So like definitely there was stuff happening for sure. Was it like 100% God all the time? Probably not. But that kind of mini revival broke out amongst the staff. We were having like prayer meetings, and I felt like I was kind of in the middle of that. And so like went back to my college freshman year. I was like leading prayer meetings in our little prayer chapel on campus and like staying up till midnight praying. So I was like on fire, like going for it in a lot of these ways. Continued to go back on staff throughout college, and really was like, okay, I think I want to be in ministry. Like this is my career path. This is my life path. I was going to a Christian liberal arts college in Santa Barbara at the time, and like got my degree in theology. Was like, I'm like fully committing. I think my advisor professor didn't know what to do with me. He was like, girl, you are off the deep end, but like, okay.
Like, I don't know what your plan is, but
like, he just was like, the papers I wanted to write, the stuff I wanted to study, he was like, have fun. But I was just like, I've never known this part of Christianity. Like charismatic Christianity felt like that hyper spirituality that I had been told, like that was the best way, you know, that was the formula, was kind of the asceticism, like give up the worldly things to have, you know, a happy life. Like a happy life, a fulfilling career was when you give everything to God. And that's a lot of the stories I heard from the staff too, was like, I had an MBA, I had, you know, this great career, but I gave it all up to come work at J.H. Ranch. Like that was kind of, it was very like the missionary, you know, we heard that at Bethel a lot too, the people who had these great careers and gave it all up to move to Reading.
And it feels like once you're, what they would say, you know, your eyes have been open to the prophetic and tongues and manifestations, it feels like anything less is kind of, you're not getting the fullness of God. Like once your eyes have been opened, why would I step back and like go, in my mind, I was like, why would I step back and go back to a non-denominational church? It's kind of boring.
Right.
Like you're riding the high of like the emotions that are in the room. I mean, people who just seem like so sold out for God. It feels like once you enter that level of spirituality, like how do you go back to a normal church structure after that?
And one of the ways that like cult organizations keep you hooked is that like secret wisdom, secret knowledge of like, we have the answer. We, you know, all these other Christians are doing this thing, but we actually know what God is really like. And we have the ways, you know, that you can be the most spiritual and the most ascended. So it's nothing new, right? Like we've seen it in lots of cults, but smart, lovely people fall for it every day.
Yes. And I feel like having them be so, I did want to touch on that, how you were saying that they were kind of like physically appealing. It seemed like the life that you wanted. I felt that way about Bethel too, where so many students in Reading. I mean, there was a joke that they would like only accept hot people or like attractive people. Like it was very hipster vibe.
Yeah.
So I know for those of you who are not familiar with Bethel and grew up in a completely different atmosphere, it can sound really crazy and out there. But when you're there, it seems like a bunch of really cool people who all believe the same thing. Like, I don't know. It just doesn't seem that weird.
Right.
You know, everybody was like really hipster and cool at the time. And you just feel like, yes, I want to be here.
Right. So like if you think about all these gorgeous, cool people who are all like athletic and outdoorsy and have the same values living together for a whole summer, like stuff's gonna happen. And
so what happened?
So I was still like fully on the purity train. Like that was such, at this point, you know, being 18, 19, 20, such an ingrained part of my identity. And my relationship with my dad and my relationship with God, like it is in there. And so for me, I had a lot of like crushes and like baby relationships. But there was like a big message of like the staff has to be above reproach. That was like their like biblical catchphrase of like, if a guest were to walk by and see you and a, you know, person of the opposite sex, like on staff talking in a corner, what would they assume about you? So it was even like the perception of anything going on, we had to be hyper aware of. And so that just really ingrained in me like this shame-based view of even my interactions with men. And like, I can't even let people on the outside perceive that maybe something's going on, let alone something actually be happening or like we actually do anything. So I did have like so many great friends there, but I felt like it was all like really deep female friendships. And guys I'd have like a crush every summer, I feel like, but it never really went anywhere. Also, they all lived across the country from me. So it was like a lot of people would maybe have a little crush during the summer and then they'd get home and start dating. For me, that never really felt like an option. So that was
Did
hard.
anybody ever date, or was it against the rules to date other?
There were some people who like came dating, which was like discouraged, and I think they had like the full-time staff when they like interviewed them would have like big conversations about like kind of like your experience at Bethel, like your purity plan and like how will you guys like protect this while you're here.
Yeah, I feel like it was discouraged. There was a couple people in my revival group both years that had boyfriends and girlfriends that they came with, and it did feel like there was like a weird vibe of like, y'all better be like being good.
Yeah, and honestly it felt like the people who did bring their partner, it was like almost like an interview. Like my friend Thomas, I remember his girlfriend came one summer and worked on staff, and it felt like an interview for like them to get married. Like they weren't engaged yet, but it was like, is she accepted by all of his mentors? And then like the next summer they're married, you know, like it just, it felt like a tryout, which just is so creepy and weird. Yeah. So I definitely like felt like everyone around me, especially as I got older, was kind of connecting and like finding their people. But because I was so disconnected from like the non-summer life of JH Ranch, I always felt like I kind of missed out. And that's where like, I think this piece is important to talk about with JH and Bethel and whatever like high control organization you're a part of, is like, this idea of conditional belonging is so powerful. Of like, there are certain things that you have to do to be in the club, and like that is how you belong. And kind of having, I've mentioned the term formula a bunch of times, but like having a formula and like steps to do to get there, to get that belonging, is a really powerful motivator. And so I think that's what like kept me coming back, was this promise of like, but maybe I will meet my husband next summer. Maybe I will finally get recognized by leadership and get hired as a full-time staff, which felt like the ultimate thing. And so, you know, I think Bethel kind of has similar progression of like getting hired by the church, getting to be a pastor there, that keeps people coming back and like on the hook, if you will, with this conditional belonging.
Yeah, constantly like climbing. I mean, that was the goal. I know at Bethel, so many people wanted to be hired on as staff and just continue up and on. And a lot of people did. Yeah. A lot of people, you know, wanted to be revival group pastors and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so.
And you see it happen. And so I got to the point where like all of my friends got hired, but I didn't. So
at JH?
Yeah, so I kept coming back as summer staff, and they were all full-time staff. Like by the time I like was starting at Bethel, like had graduated college and was starting. So that was honestly, like, to lead into that, I feel like that was a big motivator for my time at Bethel. Was, well, JH isn't working out. Like, I thought maybe this would be my career because it just checks all my boxes with like the adventure stuff, but also with ministry. But now that I'm like graduated college, I have a theology degree. I've paid my dues. Like, they know me, they've given me leadership positions, but they're not going to actually pay me. Well, maybe I'll try at Bethel and see. And so I had been exposed to Bethel through like the ministry teams coming out, the revival groups coming out, to use like the JH property for retreats, but also they'd minister to the staff while they were there. And so,
are they friends? How does it work exactly? I guess like Bethel leadership, are they just friends with the owners?
Yeah. So Heather, the like wife of the owner, intercessor lady, somehow became friends with Benny Johnson. So they were buddy. And then Heather is like a very Zionist, very into Israel, like friends with Benjamin Netanyahu, like has like done a lot with the schools in Israel, like has what she thinks like a mandate from God to, you know, protect and serve Israel, which I very much was a part of when I worked at JH Ranch, and have since like had to come to terms and grieve a lot with like how Zionist that organization was. And I had like it was just like so normal. I had no like reality check of how damaging that was and how problematic that was at the time. But yeah, so Heather and Benny somehow got hooked up. I think the Israel thing was a big part of it, you know, Happy Intercessor stuff, which was Benny's book that she wrote about intercession. So like they were very much cut from the same cloth. And then, I think just started sending Bethel teams out. Chris came out and spoke to the staff a few times. Danny Silk, when he was still there, like all the Bethel leadership kind of made their rounds. I think Bill came out one summer. But yeah, definitely like the moms and dads at JH, met all the moms and dads at Bethel.
Yeah.
They were friends.
So talk about how you applied to Bethel and like getting into Bethel, and kind of what was your first year like at the time?
Yeah. So I had been like really involved in ministry in Santa Barbara, where I went to school as well, and kind of got to, I feel like JH in Santa Barbara, I had a experience kind of at the same time of realizing like I don't think they're going to hire me on staff. And so Bethel felt like, again, another step of like, well, they're even more spiritual, like that's even more of like the people on fire for God. So that whole like spiritual purity, spiritual ascent motivator was part of it. And then I remember applying, like I actually applied to my grad school, where I ended up going 7 years later, however many years later, and Bethel at the same time. And so I was like, I'm either going to go be a therapist or I'm going to go to Bethel. And ended up choosing Bethel, which, you know, it is what it is. It's like if you go to school for therapy at 22, you know, you don't have a lot of life experience. You're going to, you know, a lot of people go and they're like, do I even want to be a therapist? So I am glad I lived life before going to grad school. You know, my time in Reading was a weird bubble of like, is it even real life? Who knows? But went in 2012, same year as you, to first year. I honestly, like, hearing your story of like the application process, I'm like, I don't remember any of that. Like, I think I blacked out. Like, I don't remember. I think,
well, you were probably so pure that they didn't rake you over the coals. I was
right. It
not
wasn't
so pure, so I got I know, you're like, I've had this purity ring forever. I'm good, you know? I was like, I've had 4 purity rings and it's going to last this time. So no.
Yeah, no, but I really think like I do struggle with like memories from that time. And, you know, one way I've conceptualized that now is like there was so much of my reality that was like performing me rather than being me, of like just performing this part that was pure, that was spiritual, that was like perfect, and not actually like authentically living from myself. Like my true self was just buried deep inside, along with like my sexuality. You know, they were just hanging out in there in the closet. So yeah, I think a lot of that experience was just like, oh, this is the logical next step. Like this is another step in the formula to like be in ministry, to be pure, to be spiritual. And so yeah, was in Abby's revival group with you in first year, which like, I don't know how much you've talked about Abby on this podcast, but she is like a firecracker whirlwind of like emotional health and deep spirituality and prophetic. And she was like no one I had ever met. So I think I like learned a lot about myself and loving myself and like dealing with my self-hatred in first year, which was like really needed and lovely. And I think I experienced like an old pattern with leaders from like sports and from spiritual spaces of like being really beautiful, tan, smart, gifted. Like, how can we use you to make us look good without really feeling like that relationship was supportive? And so I had some experience with that with Abby of feeling like she would like tell me to do something and I'm like, yes ma'am, you know, like tell me to jump, I say how high, and I'd do it, and then I'd be left with like a big vulnerability hangover and feeling kind of like used and dropped. And then there wasn't a lot of like relational connection. So it was a bit of that formula of like, do this prophetic act, do this thing. Like I remember one time, do you remember Ryan, who was like one of our...
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so I had the biggest crush on him in first year.
Oh my gosh, stop.
He was so cute. And now that I look back, I'm like, gross. Sorry, Ryan, if you ever listen to this, but yeah, no thanks.
It's too funny.
But
I do remember him.
He was friends with Abby. He was like a volunteer in our revival group, which is like our small group. And I guess like Abby really wanted him to date and was like trying to push him to dating different girls, and he like nothing would work out. And so she's like, you just need a woman to unlock your heart. And so she grabbed me. This is like after a school day, like at the end of revival group. And she's like, okay, Sam, as a prophetic act, I want you to roar into Ryan's heart. So she doesn't know that
This is so Bethel. This is so Bethel.
Yeah, she doesn't know I have a crush on him. Which, like, crushes for me, I'd never done anything with a guy. So a crush was, like, so overwhelming and, like,
yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm 13 still at this point, being, like, however old I was, 22. And so I, like, literally, he's in a chair and I'm standing up and I, like, lean over him and, like, scream, roar into his heart, like, into his chest.
I'm too introverted for that. I would lose my mind.
And so then she's like, no. Do it like this. And she puts her hand on the back of my head and pushes my head onto his chest. So I'm literally like laying my head on his chest, screaming into his heart. And he's like crying or something. I don't even know what's going on. And then she's like, okay.
Oh, it's the culty vibes are culty.
They're culting.
For sure.
Yes.
They're culting right now. No, and I think like, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm sure that was really uncomfortable because you had a crush on him and then it's like, scream his heart awake and you're like, be awake for me. I don't know. It's just like
and
very
like lay my head
strange.
on your chest, like girl who has never kissed anyone. Like I'm like, oh my God, this is a lot, you know, like with this man I think is beautiful. So I did actually have a conversation with Abby after that and told her how uncomfortable I was. And like, I had a crush on him, which she didn't know, but like that, you know, was a part of it. And she, you know, apologized and handled it well. But I think that always like made things a little awkward with us. Like I felt like after all of my friends were like her inner circle, but I was never like a part of that. Yeah. I'd say like first year was a lot of like deep healing and like actually understanding like the emotional part of myself. Which I think was helpful. I think that like set me on the path to want to work with folks and like do that deep work of inner healing, which I had been interested in before. Like I'd come up to Bethel and done like a sozo training with my mom like years before. That kind of got me like hooked and wanted to come to BSSM too. So yeah, but I think my time with Abby was still like trying to do the steps, trying to follow the formula to like be accepted, to be a leader, to, you know, again, pay your dues, to like have authority, have power in that space, which you had to, there was a lot of messages about like honoring people's gifting and their anointing so that you can have gifting and anointing. Like serve the person that you want to be essentially. So that
first year was so interesting. We were in each other's small group. I honestly only remember meeting, which I forgot we even had small groups. I don't know if we had them in second year. I only remember one time doing this. I feel like it was we were all sitting on the floor. I don't know where it was, but that's the only memory.
I remember that one too.
I'm like, did we meet more than once? Because I only remember meeting one time.
It was like
but
raining
it was just
outside.
So long ago. Yeah, I think so. And they were sitting on the carpet. But yeah, I don't know. Like first year was super interesting because in a lot of ways, I think it ingrained who I am as far as like liking vulnerability, and like our revival group was so go up in front of everybody and say the one thing that would make you think that nobody would love you, and then we're all going to tell you that we love you.
It's very much like exposure therapy for vulnerability.
Exposure therapy to the max. It was like whatever makes you uncomfortable, do that. And like sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, sometimes it felt beautiful in the moment, and then looking back I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so culty. Having watched cult documentaries and how a lot of it is like spill your darkest secrets to people, and it's a lot. Like it's a lot. So I have a lot of mixed feelings about first year because I'm like, I enjoyed it while I was in it, but I think like it was more self-help based than religious to me. I feel like the church aspect, like the 9 to 5 or whatever, the actual other things we were doing, that was more ministry vibe than what our revival group was.
Yeah, and from what I heard from other folks in first year not in our revival group had a very unique experience because of Abby, where it was like so intimate and vulnerable and like emotional health based.
Yeah, I felt like everybody was my best friend. It was interesting.
Yeah, and that's one thing like with Abby, but also with Bethel as a whole that I've thought about since is like, you know, speaking of like how cults operate is, you know, there's often these big like cathartic experiences that they're seeking that bring up a lot of emotion and physical sensation that, you know, honestly, you know, in therapy speak, we'd call it like flood your system, like flood your emotions, flood your nervous system with too much stimulation. And that's like where we actually lose our critical thinking skills. It can be traumatizing or re-traumatizing to experience flooding. And the way that we heal from trauma is like slow titrated experiences that are within our window of tolerance in our nervous system. And so looking back on like kind of big picture of my experience as a whole at Bethel, it just felt like re-traumatizing after re-traumatizing spiritual experience of like so much flooding. Yeah,
I've heard that term before, but I hadn't thought about it in terms of Bethel. And that is what it was like. It's like you do really feel just disconnected from like what is going on. It's just so much is going on. It's overwhelming. I remember I was sobbing and in tears all the time. All the time. So many emotions in first and second year.
Yeah. And you're in these situations of like worship being so beautiful and these like songs that are so, you know, you have the big band, you have the lights. Sometimes there's like smoke. I don't know. Like I felt like
conga lines.
Yeah. Like it's just a very, you know, it's like if you see the cult documentaries where everybody's like having, what's it called? Like the ecstatic dance where like they're just like moving their bodies in order to have like a spiritual experience. It almost feels like that, where we were just all this like room of people all singing the same song, which like is good and it's ancestral. And like there's part of us as humans in our DNA that like love singing song together with other people, and there's part of like our bodies that knows how to do that and knows that that's good. But then I feel like it gets like co-opted for, you know, these different reasons. Like our emotions kind of get used against us in that moment.
Yeah, definitely. Did you know that you wanted to do second year going into it, that you were gonna finish out all 3 years, or did you kind of decide after first year?
So I left. I took a year off.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know.
Yeah, so I went back to JH after first year, and during that summer, I think I like had every intention of coming back when I left first year, and then during that summer, I was just like, I think I'm good. Like I have other stuff I want to do. You know, I graduated college and gone right into Bethel, and so I was like, I kind of want to work. I kind of want to just like get some life experience. I think my time in Reading is done. I will say first year was like a very creative year for me. So I was like inspired about like fashion and maybe design and like just wanting to try some different things, which is so interesting because I went in like ministry as my career. And so it was weird. I kind of had this blip on the radar of like, oh, maybe I'll just be a fashion designer. Like, why not? But I think,
like, why not?
Yeah, but I think Bethel was so like the 7 mountains of society, like go influence, like you can be a missionary in like wherever your sphere of influence is. And so I think that perspective shift was like, oh, I can be in ministry, but I don't have to like work for a church. And that felt refreshing after so many years of trying to get on staff at a ministry and like it not working out.
Absolutely.
So I left, I moved back to Santa Barbara. I worked in like high-end retail as a stylist for like a boutique, and really weird like juxtaposition with my time at Bethel. That's like not like that at all.
It's weird going back to society after being in Bethel. I always felt like I have this little secret life in California and like nobody back home kind of understands. Mm-hmm. Like, all of you are blind. You don't know that all these amazing things are happening. It just feels like you're entering a different reality when you go back home.
Right. And so the funny thing is I actually had a pretty charismatic church that I was a part of in Santa Barbara. And so like the Bethel team like comes down every like March for their missions trip because it's in Isla Vista where UCSB is, and so they have like a lot of college ministries for like the big parties and like spring break. A Bethel team would always come down, so I was still connected. Like I was still had that hook of like, well, I'm doing ministry here, but like Bethel's still like on the pedestal. And honestly, you know, I'm like 23 trying to figure out life and career, and it's hard. Like, it's not this big emotional experience. It's like showing up for work every day and having to like wear heels all day and, you know, trying to date and trying to make friends. And it just was boring and hard. And so by the end of that year, I was like, I think I'm not done. God's not done with my season in Reading. So I'm going to go back.
Yeah.
Which is crazy, right? Like, I made it out. I got out.
You did it. No, I think it's like, I think some of it might have to do, at least for me, is like I was riding this like super emotional high. So then once you go back to normal society, everything feels a little lackluster. Totally. So I could see feeling like, okay, this year life is kind of boring, having to work and do all this, and it's not giving you that same, you have high, low, lows, but at least you're like always chasing the more of God. Yeah. So it makes sense to feel like, well, I should go back. Yeah. I should see if there's anything left there for me.
Right. And it was very much that like self-righteous, like, oh, I'm ascended, I'm holier than all these people because I know I've been to Bethel and like I know what it's like there. And
because they would tell us that. I remember, especially in second year, they would always tell us that, just watch, guys, you're going to go to other churches, and when you say that you attended Bethel, they are going to love you. They're going to want you to bring all these gifts to their church. And I really thought, okay, I'm going to be a little mini celebrity at any church I go to because Bethel is so highly esteemed. And it kind of was in a lot of circles. Right. I mean,
definitely in the church
I definitely have gotten that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think there was that, like, we were still drinking the Kool-Aid, even though we had left Bethel. Like, my church was still like, wow, what was it like? You went to first year? Oh my gosh. You know, I'm like the little celebrity. So, yeah, I went back for second year, but was like a year late. So did second year with, like, Jubilee would have been in third year at that point. So yeah, I had Dave Ward in second year, and he was in his season.
I know his name, but I don't remember.
He was like the very
anything
tall,
about him.
Blonde British man.
Was he white?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
He was like, looked out.
I remember a tall white
man. So Dave had taken like not a vow of silence, but like probably as close as you could get to that, like in a place like Bethel, where like
what
he didn't want to preach or lead anything that year.
Oh.
So what we would do in a revival group is we would sit in silence until Holy Spirit showed up. And that was my whole second year. So imagine going from Abby and how first year was.
I'd be like, what is going on? Where is my spiritual high? No, That's so interesting. Why did he want to be a revival group pastor then? Because
I think it was his second year.
talk.
I think he had like been more normal, you know, if normal is a thing at Bethel, but like in the first year. And then like God gave him this mandate of like, don't lead anything, just wait till I show up. And so that's, I mean, he would like have a conversation with us, you know, like we would chat, but like he didn't teach, he didn't lead any, like we would just sit, and that's what we did.
What would God showing up look like? So you guys are all sitting in silence. Did he ever show up? And if he did, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so it would usually start with someone manifesting, which you can imagine. Like, I mean, I'm a therapist now. If I'm sitting in silence, like you can only sit in silence in a session for so long before like the person starts talking. Like even in a conversation, someone's like, okay, how about them Dodgers? You know, it's like, part of human nature is like to fill silence unless we're really practiced in silence. And so I will say I got a lot of practice with Dave, which I still like. My professors in grad school were like, you use the tool of silence in therapy so well. And I'm like, thanks, Dave Ward. Like I really built this.
I learned to be comfortable with this.
Like I know how to wait until the right moment. And yeah, but it would usually start with like someone's crying or they're like twitching or like, I mean, I remember one, this was like, I mean, I hate however you use this word is, but it did feel traumatizing, where one person in the group just started screaming, like, like just,
oh my gosh.
And it was like, how we conceptualized it at the time was it was like a demon. And so we literally did like a deliverance for this person in revival group, and how we kind of like our interns. Sometimes Dave wouldn't talk the whole time and the interns would kind of like debrief with us at the end, which I think this was one of those cases where they kind of, the way they conceptualized it was like the holiness of God came into the room and this demon spirit couldn't handle it. And so this person started manifesting and then we all cast it out. And like now thinking back, I'm like, how horrible for that person of like, oh, you were the one who was demon possessed in revival group. Like, we're glad you're fine now.
How do you ever come back?
Yeah.
You know, I feel like even walking back into revival group the next week would be just horrible.
Right.
And I only remember one time that happening. And I think first year, it was during worship. I heard someone screaming, but surprisingly, that wasn't something I encountered too often, like surprisingly, but that's pretty freaky.
Yeah. And that was like, I think that was one of Dave's anointings. Like there were definitely like
demon.
Yeah. Like I had
out?
been around him when that happened multiple times. Like on our retreat at the beginning of second year, I was like with him and Claire Merwill praying for a girl and like her voice changed. And this is like actually one of the most hilarious memories I have of BSSM. But she goes in this state. She's like a little like cute little girl. And this deep voice comes out of her to Dave, goes, "What do you have to do with me, son of God?" And Dave, in his British accent, goes, "Oh, son of God, how lovely." I was like, what is happening right now? I was just like, I have no clue. But he was like teaching me how to deliver people from demons. And like joking around, not being scared was one of his tactics too.
It's giving Harry Potter.
Yeah.
When ridiculous or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
100%.
make it into something funny.
Yeah. In his British accent too. It was like perfect. So yeah, second year was weird. And I will say, like, I think having Abby, which felt like vulnerability as currency. Like vulnerability is the way you get belonging. It's the way that you fit in. It's what's required of you to be in this group. And then to have Dave, that was like almost like, if you've heard of like the blank face experiment that they did at Stanford with psychology of like with attachment, where it's like babies, like if the mom is just blank face, like babies will cry and they're really anxious because the mom's just sitting there like with no expression, not matching their distress, but not like soothing them. And that's like how I think my attachment with Dave felt in second year was like, I want a mentor. Like Abby, I felt like I could never quite get into that inner circle. Like she liked me enough, but she wasn't like a mentor to me. Maybe Dave will be that mentor. And then he was just like silent. And so I think that set me up for the leader I got in third year, which ended up being kind of the straw that broke the camel's back with my disillusionment with Bethel, with, you know, realizing like it was not a good environment for me and time to leave.
Yeah. So you knew that you wanted to do a third year?
I think it was kind of the same as first year, where I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do a third year, but I'm not like, I didn't have a ton of vision for it. And then in second year, I got like invited by a friend to go. We do like ministry trips in second year, not just our missions trip, but like you can travel with different pastors and stuff. And so I got invited by a friend to go on a ministry trip with this pastor named Chad, who did a lot of like evangelism. I like forgot the word for it for a second, but with like,
it's been a while,
but would do a lot of like, I know you've talked about like treasure hunts on the podcast before, but like treasure hunt type stuff, words of knowledge, a lot of prophecy. But he was like kind of seen as like a young, cool pastor. Like, I'm curious too, like your view of him, maybe not knowing him as well.
Who was it?
Chad Dedman.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I don't remember him too much. He would come and speak. Is he the one that, no, that was Steve Backlund, the funny one. The guy was like, let's laugh at that. But I know who you're talking about. I can picture his face. I just didn't know too much about him. That's not who I would have thought based on what you sent me. Or because she sent me like a paper that she had written about this experience that we're going to get into. And that's very interesting.
Yeah. So both of his parents were on staff at Bethel. And
oh wait, who's his dad?
Kevin Dedman. Or you might be thinking of Kevin.
Never mind. Yeah, I don't know Chad Dedman though. I know Kevin Dedman.
And then his mom's Teresa, who did a lot of like the art ministry stuff.
Yes.
So yeah, like they were kind of peripheral, like not super involved in BSSM, but like we'd maybe take a class with them or see them every once in a while. And then Chad would travel and do a lot of like conferences and speak at churches and like outreach stuff. And he was like seen as like very prophetic. He had like really accurate words of knowledge. Actually, like, trigger warning, him and Sean Bowles were like buddy, and they were kind of seen as like in the same, like they like came up together in like the charismatic world. So,
which we can get into it later, but are you feeling like there was some of the similar Sean Bowles tactics that were going on with Chad with these like really accurate prophetic words?
Maybe. I mean, I wasn't privy to that. So I know like you've interviewed people who like, or talked to people who like knew, like were actually asked to do that research. I was never like asked to look people up on social media or like know anything beforehand. But I'm also like, I mean, we went to San Diego to like my parents' church, and my mom's best friend had a ministry that I connected them to. And I'm like, maybe I did tell him stuff. Maybe he asked me questions and I just like didn't even realize it. And then he turned it into a word. Who knows? Like, I can't even remember.
Yeah. Because Jedediah, his dad was Bob Hartley. His episodes just came out. And one thing that he would say was they would go to the host families and he would kind of get tea on the church members, but just between these host families, and then he would use that, or he would get the conference registration list. And from what I've heard from him, that was a very common tactic for a lot of people, is that they would say, I need to pray over the list. And Bill Johnson knew and would do that and would give lists to people so that you would know who was going to be at the conference. So not saying that we know for sure. We're just saying, I mean, it does happen in these circles. So I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised either. And even like people unknowingly like sharing information. Like I remember Sean got a word for my mom at one of her friends' ministry events about me and like had all this information about me. And I'm like, oh yeah, he's best friends with Chad. Like, of course he knew all that. It was after I'd interned with him. So I'm just like,
that's hilarious. Well, I mean, he knows you or knows very closely of you. So
yeah, I went on this ministry trip to Santa Cruz with Chad. He was like a surfer, outdoorsman. So like, I felt like we hit it off really quickly, because I'm from a surf town. I grew up surfing. Like, it was just this like, oh, I like your vibe kind of thing. And, you know, Chad was someone who, he's not even like a good looking guy, but like just was charismatic and like knew how to be the life of the party. And so I felt like at Bethel, there was a lot of like very like spiritual people and like some serious people. He was just like, yeah, let's go to a bar and drink. Like, let's do whatever. Like, God's awesome. Like, just, I think I needed, after having Dave it was like after having Abby and then having Dave, I felt like I needed a Chad to just like let my hair down, like just have fun and like be seen as for all these parts of me that I felt like kind of got pushed to the side in these environments of like, I am a surfer, I am an athlete, I am like creative and a leader. And so I remember like early on, he started calling me Storm because like when I would manifest in the spirit, I'd like shake my head back and forth and my hair would fly everywhere. And I had this like kind of white blonde hair at the time. And so he's like, you're like Storm from X-Men and you're like super powerful and like change the atmosphere. And I just, after having like
my gosh,
leaders that I felt like didn't see me, I just ate that up. I mean, it was just like, oh, like somebody finally sees me at Bethel and maybe this is my way to get a place here. So I ended up interning for Chad, going on all these surf trips, ministry trips. You know, he had all these cool like Australian people on his team who were surfers and like
cool kids club.
Yeah, it felt very much like the cool kids club. And Chad also was someone who is just like, let's do the craziest idea whim that I have. Like I remember him calling me at like 10 p.m. and being like, we're gonna go longboard down this big hill in Reading, want to come? And I'm like, okay. And we just like meet in the middle of the night and are like skateboarding down a big hill, like just stuff like that.
Random.
Yeah, like so random, but it felt so fun and so out of the box that I had been stuck in for so long. So yeah, initially like really fun intern for Chad. And then at the time we started third year, his dad got caught like asking for happy endings at massage parlors, and he was on staff at Bethel, and so it was like this big scandal.
How did I not know about this? Because I feel like I did hear that something happened.
Yeah, well, because you were already gone, because I was a
it.
year behind you. So
yeah, but wow, you would think I would have heard about. What's funny is not funny, but I remember when we were in Reading, there was a lot of chatter that was happening a lot in Reading at these massage parlors. Okay. So so that actually is not the first time I've heard of that being prevalent.
And
in
I
Reading.
think there were rumors going around about Kevin before it was like official, but he like I think had to like take a sabbatical. He was still on staff, but like couldn't do ministry for a little bit. Like did
he admit to it?
Yeah, he admitted.
And he was still on staff.
I think he got caught. Like I think the police were involved. I think it was like they did a sting on this massage parlor, and he was like connected to it.
Does he still work there?
Did they keep him? Yeah, he definitely like kept his job, and like him and Teresa were still married. You know, they did marriage counseling, but they stayed together. So this all just came out when I started third year with Chad. So he is like going through this family crisis of like, this is happening to my dad. This is happening to my parents. He was like married at the time. But like, I mean, he's still married, but like just context. And so, yeah, me being like an empathetic, emotionally intelligent human, he like confided in me a lot about his process with his dad, like the trauma of it, like all he was going through. And like we got really like emotionally connected. And that kind of turned into like just processing anything he was going through, stuff in his marriage, where I kind of like became his therapist in a way. And, you know, I think after Abby and after like relationships at JH Ranch, where like you did get really close to people you were working with, I was kind of like, oh, this is normal. This is like part of being here. I mean, part of Bethel culture is like sitting down to coffee with someone and like, tell me your testimony, you know, tell me like your whole life story and all the traumas and like how you ended up here. So I think it was pretty normalized in my life up until that point to like be pretty emotionally intimate and vulnerable with people before trust was established. Yeah,
that was huge in first year.
Yeah. And so we had been groomed, I guess we could say, up until that point.
To think that that's really normal. I think the same thing happened with me and Ted, is that I was just so used to this like flooding of emotion, flooding of vulnerability, like that love bombing didn't feel like love bombing to me at all.
It's just feels how like, you do relationship.
Yeah, this is how relationships work.
Yeah.
And of course you love me, you know, because I prayed that God would tell me or send me someone who loved me right away, you know, so you don't like see it as that. And I could see how for you having these kind of not fully fulfilling relationships with leadership where you weren't asked to do the JH ranch, and then first year and second year were kind of hard. It's like, now that you do have this, now that you do have somebody who is confiding in you and you feel like you're in their inner circle, like, are you going to slap it away?
Right.
Especially when he's going through like such a hard time that you feel like you kind of need to help him.
Yeah, and I felt chosen and like, oh, I have the skills to support you, to help you through this. I'm a good listener. I'm good at like hearing hard stuff. Like that was something at JH Ranch I was really good at as I was like leading groups of high schoolers. Is like I'd always have like the trauma stories on my team and could like hold space for them. Like that's always been a part of who I am. And so at the same time, I found out that my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And so Chad was going through this. I was also like dealing with my mom having cancer and having to like fly home for surgeries and just like supporting her. And so I started like sharing that experience with Chad and how hard that was and stressful. And he just like didn't really have capacity. I think he actually told me that. I think he said, I don't have capacity for your stuff in this season because I'm so overwhelmed with my dad, but like I'll pray for her, or like God will heal her. Like very like trite spiritual bypassing responses. And so that experience really broke trust. It was kind of, and this was
Absolutely.
Only a couple months in. Like I'm glad it happened early on, because I was able to go like, whoa, okay, internal boundary. Like I actually don't feel safe with Chad because he can't be there for me in the way I'm needing, even though I'm there for him like above and beyond. But this is not a reciprocal relationship. This is not, I had felt dropped by Abby in some ways. I'd felt dropped by Dave, but this felt like an actual rejection, not just like neglect.
Yeah, like he's verbalizing.
Yeah, he's
no.
like, I don't have space for you. Like you have to go deal with your own stuff. And yeah, so that I feel like I pulled back a lot of my like vulnerability and the parts of myself that felt more intimate at that point. And then the blinders really came off of like just what narcissistic behavior he displayed, of like it was always on his schedule. It was always like this urgent like emergency whenever he had an idea or a problem that we had to like have an emergency meeting, be at his beck and call. It was all about him. I mean, even his sermons, it was just like his stories of traveling around the world and surfing and God doing miracles. And it's like, you're not.
What's the common denominator?
Yeah, like you're not
Chad.
preaching the Bible. You're not teaching. Like he wasn't a good teacher. He wasn't smart. Like I had a degree in theology. I just started seeing like I could preach better than you. You just are a hype man. Like you just go in and blow everything up and blah. And like people get all excited.
And he's like born into ministry.
Right.
So he kind of gets these opportunities. And I think I noticed that a ton when we were at Bethel from certain leaders where a lot of their sermons were like story times, like it's not so much. When I came out of Bethel, I did not know very much about the Bible. I really don't feel like I learned much at all when it came to the actual Word of God.
Right. We had like Rick, what was his last name? Like the one Bible teacher. Oh, well, we had
what
Dan,
you're talking about.
And we had like two people who would actually teach the Bible, but it was like only certain days of the week during school. It wasn't even every day we'd have them.
And it was the classes that nobody
liked,
paid attention to. Like I remember they were like, "Oh, Dan's coming to talk to us today."
Yeah. I actually went on a ministry trip with Rick. I'm forgetting his last name, but he was like the New Testament scholar, and it was like so fun. I think that was the best ministry trip I've ever went on. I went with one with Abby. I went on a bunch with Chad, and I was like, oh, that one with Rick was actually nice because it was like normal church. Like he actually taught a sermon, and it wasn't all like hype and emotion.
The emotions.
Yeah. So, I had about like 3 months of just trying to be boundary with Chad, trying to figure out what I was going to do. Like I wanted to finish third year because I felt like if I left my internship early, it would affect my chances to get a job at Bethel. I didn't want to like burn the bridge, but also I felt like just so used. And so like, this guy's an idiot. Like why, why am I working for him? But all that messaging of like, you have to serve in order to get your position. You have to honor the anointing. God chose him, all this stuff that was kind of going against my better judgment. And so it was around my birthday. So it was in March. I actually was like playing volleyball in the sanctuary on a Monday night because that's what we would do. And the sanctuary at Bethel was like very thin old carpet over concrete.
Ooh.
And so I dove for a ball because I was like a junior Olympic athlete, played in college.
Yeah.
Dove for a ball and bounced my head against the floor and got a concussion.
Oh my gosh.
So that I was out for like 2 months. Like I couldn't go to church. I couldn't go to class. I couldn't do like anything. I had to like lay in a dark room. I could like kind of listen to audiobooks and stuff. But that was like the end of my 3rd year. Honestly, I couldn't go.
Wow.
And so I just told Chad, I honestly felt like a gift from God at the time.
Yeah.
I was like, I wanted a way out. There was no way that like I felt like I could get myself out. And so God gave me a concussion. Like that was the way I thought about it.
Yeah. No, I could see why it would feel like that, because you're like, you felt so stuck, especially if you're wanting to potentially get a position. I would have felt the same way, that I have to finish out my 3rd year, or else you're kind of like shooting yourself in the foot with potentially
people would see you as
there.
Untrustworthy or
flaky
rebellious.
or whatever.
Yeah. And who knows what story Chad would tell about me to leadership when like his parents are on staff, he's on staff, like he's in with all those people. So yeah, I felt like that saved me. I had a way out. And right before that happened, we went to San Diego to do an event with my mom's best friend's ministry. And I mean, she drives a Maserati. They have lots of influence in San Diego, very wealthy family. And Chad, that was just like catnip for Chad. I mean, he is like Mr. Entitlement, wants to like take advantage of wealthy people who have houses in Hawaii so he can go surf, and like, they're in San Diego. So he's like, oh, if I can get in with these people, great. And so we go down there. My mom had worked hard to set up like all the host families for our ministry team. I was staying at my parents' house. We had like this whole fun beach day set up, and then we're going to do ministry like the rest of the weekend. And Chad, a friend of his from Orange County, called and said, hey, the surf's really good. You want to come up? And he bailed. He just like flaked on the whole day my mom had set up, flaked on all the host families. I think he did like one night of speaking towards the end of the weekend. But
that's
like
ridiculous.
Just bailed. And my parents were furious. I mean, to this day, my dad's like, if I see him, I'm going to punch him in the face. Like, that's how mad my dad was.
Wow.
And so my dad just told me, he's like, this guy's an idiot. You need to stop working for him. And so like he's a businessman. He's been like the president of lots of like Fortune 500 companies. And he, we talked about like my career path and like what it would mean to quit and all of that. And then I think it was like the next week I got my concussion. It was just the weirdest timing, where we had talked about like, how do I get out of this situation when like this guy is bad news and like has a lot of narcissistic tendencies and is really just like into himself, and still preserve like my career path at Bethel. So yeah, that was my way out. And then I stayed for 2 more years, I think, and just like volunteered in the young adults ministry. And that's when I really kind of went through a lot of disillusionment. I never went back really to big church because, one, I couldn't handle it with my brain. Like, it was too much. Tribe was a lot smaller, the young adults ministry, and it was in a different building. So it felt like I could like stand in the back or leave if I wanted. Like, there was a lot more freedom, versus big church just was like that. I couldn't handle the flooding feeling. My brain literally couldn't do it anymore. It was wild.
Yeah. Like your body was rejecting it.
100%. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so Tribe, I had a lot of friends in leadership. The pastor there felt like normal-ish. Like, he didn't feel like a narcissist or like really controlling. Like, and so, yeah, I felt like I could like be half in and half out. And I had a virtual styling job at the time and just like had fun, like just enjoyed my friends in Reading and was like not that involved. By the end, I wasn't really involved with Bethel at all. And I was like dating and, Reading's beautiful in a lot of ways. Like, it's in the Shasta Trinity Forest. Like, there's the Sacramento River. Like, I really enjoyed the outdoors there. And I was like also, on the prayer team at Tribe, and like a lot of people would come up and say like, I'm so depressed, or I have so much anxiety, or like I have all this trauma and I don't know what to do with it. And I felt like all I could do was like pray for them, or like tell them I was going to pray for them. I'd worked in the healing rooms for 2 years, and I just felt like I was getting to the end of like this isn't working. Like this, people need more
Yeah.
than this. They're hurting. They're coming here for an answer and they're getting dropped. And like I had felt the experience of being dropped by Bethel leadership. And so I was like ordering books on trauma on Amazon, you know, using my parents' Amazon account. My dad called me one day. He's like, hey, would you ever consider like going back to school? Like you really like school. You're really smart. Would you ever think about like going back and getting your PhD or like going and becoming a therapist?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, no. Like, I don't want to do that. And then I sat with it and like having these experiences of so many people in the church who I felt like the church couldn't give them what they needed. And I was like on the prayer line feeling like I don't want to just refer out. I want to be the one who actually like gets to walk with them on their healing journey. And I need to understand trauma. I need to understand the brain. I need to understand like how this actually works in order to do that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was a big reason why I left, was to pursue that. And it wasn't this beautiful, like, then I was a therapist and everything was great. Like I went through a really gnarly depression when I left Bethel. Yeah. One of the biggest things that got me out was I randomly went on a trip to Europe with a friend, like from across the country. I met her through a friend at JH. We like had only met one other time and we were both working virtually at the time. And we're just talking about, we just like really clicked when we had met. And so we were always like talking on Instagram and texting. And then we're like, what if we just went to Europe for the summer and like worked from there and traveled? And then we, you know, it was like the girls trip in the group chat.
Fun.
And then we're like, wait, are we serious? Let's just do it.
What if we actually did it?
Yeah. And so we did. Like summer 2017, we went all over, had a blast. And it felt like my liberation where I was like, oh, life is so much more than Reading. Life is so much more than Bethel. And I actually have like so much more to offer the world than just like being in ministry. But yeah, there was so much grief. Like I felt like I remember having like a scream cry session with God of like, I feel like all my dreams are dead. And I literally like heard at the time Holy Spirit say, then throw a fucking funeral. And I was
oh my gosh, I love
it was so liberating. I was like, okay. And so I like did this little ritual of like burning my dreams, and like I felt like it was permission to grieve. Like I did the formula and it didn't work. Like I did the formula and it didn't give me what it always promised me to. And I've done this for over 10 years at this point, or about 10 years at this point. And it's time to like go try something new. And so that was kind of how I left Reading, was like, I'm not only leaving Reading, I'm leaving like career ministry. Like this will not be my career. And I'm accepting that. And it was the best thing I've ever done.
That's amazing. So when did it start to, like, you started to reframe your time at Bethel, then just rather than just not being enjoyable and realizing that you wanted to not do that for the rest of your life, but when did it start to feel like, oh, that was religious trauma, and you started to understand that piece of it?
Yeah. So I think it was, you know, I had about a year before I started grad school, like left Reading September 2017 and then started grad school September 2018. So through that time, like lived at home, still had that like online job, didn't have friends, like I just was alone a lot. And so I think I just would walk, like my parents lived on this preserve. And so I just walk and walk and walk. And I did a lot of like reading, processing. I started therapy. Like that was when I really started to understand like, oh, I have been in this kind of like track with J.H. Ranch and Bethel for about 10 years. And that's not real life. And so like, how do I get my life back? How do I get me back? How do I get like a real view of the world? Like I felt like my worldview had been so skewed for so long.
Yeah.
You know, and I had like my sister, who's an intelligent, smart person, like reflect to me, like, I'm so glad you got out. I'm convinced Bethel's a cult. And like talking to her about why she thought that and what she had seen, and like, you know, just having conversations with people that loved me, who like saw my parents were like very pro Bethel for a long time. I think the Chad thing really like woke them up a little bit. But they more were just like, whatever you want to do, we believe in you, we love, like, So yeah, I'd say they weren't like the best mirror for reality, but my sister was. I had like some friends from high school and college who I started getting reconnected with. I had a friend from college who started like a house church up in LA. So I would like come and stay with her on the weekends and help her with house church. And I'd like make dinner for everybody. And that was really healing because it was like, oh, church doesn't have to be the big band and the flooding. It can just be conversation in a living room and then dinner with people who are like really rad. And like, you know, they're in LA. So like actors and songwriters and like creatives and people who are just like living real life and felt really normal. And honestly, like finding a community where things were just normal felt really good.
Normal is nice really when nice. You come out of the chaos, you know?
Yeah.
I think like, and I think I've maybe shared this once before, but my ex was just so still in the Bethel world and loved it. And when we went to Atlanta, we ended up going to Bethel, Atlanta. I did not like that. I found the whole thing like really triggering. And what's funny is at the time, I still thought that I held all of Bethel's beliefs. I still, like I hadn't deconstructed the actual experiences that I was having. I just knew that I didn't like it. I just knew that something inside of me felt like really icky every time I was around it. And he ended up taking me to another charismatic church where it was like, you know, there were flags and then people are speaking in the tongues and then somebody else was interpreting the tongues. And I just remember I felt like I was going to have a panic attack. Like I actually feel like my body goes into like fight or flight whenever I'm around like the charismatic circle. Yeah. And I would tell him like, I can't go to this church. Like, please take me to a boring church. Take me to just a super boring, non-denominational church. And it's like he wanted that high. And I couldn't verbalize why I found it so traumatizing. Because at the time I thought I still believed all of these things, but it just felt so wrong, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up panic attacks because that was part of what started after my concussion was every time I was in a space with more than 10 people, I'd have a panic attack. So that was a big reason I stopped going to church too, was just like, I can't handle it. Like my body is telling me.
What do you think caused that?
What do I think caused that?
Yeah.
I mean,
just the actual concussion.
I think, no, I think it was trauma. I think that's like where I started to see, I think this is bigger than just like, oh, I didn't get picked by a leader. I have rejection sensitivity. Like, I think I actually experienced something traumatic here and my body is trying to tell me that. And I think a lot of it was like the combination of like the extreme purity culture, which is sexual trauma. You know, it's not how we think of like a big T trauma, like assault, but it is sexual trauma in that like, if we look at the definition of trauma as like too much or not enough, a harmful experience that's in either of those camps, extreme purity culture is like not enough sexual education, not enough like appropriately developmental experiences and exploration. And so like, I think I just got to the point, like almost got old enough where like all that started catching up with me. And then also just nervous system wise, being constantly flooded so often, it's like you're in that state of fight or flight all the time. Your body is going to start to, like that's going to start to show up. In your...
And I feel like it's not sustainable. I mean, okay, I guess there are some people who stay at Bethel and Redding forever, but when I look back at our class, I don't see many people who have stayed long term. Like it feels like there is this burst of being on fire and being able to be in these atmospheres, but it does feel like it doesn't feel good long term. No. I haven't seen hardly anybody stick around.
Yeah, and even a lot of the leadership, like Bill's son, Eric, left, you know, who was like the pastor of the local church. Like he was kind of the one who would inherit Bill's job. Yeah. And he left. He's across the country. And I don't know the story behind that. Maybe you have info. I don't know.
I don't.
But I'm like, that is telling when you're next in line to inherit the kingdom and you
walk away
go as far, you know, in the US as possible from California. So yeah. But I mean, even I went to a chiropractor, I think after Bethel, and he said I had signs of whiplash, which like I mentioned, one of my physical manifestations was like shaking my head really hard. And he was like, have you been in multiple car accidents? And I was like, no. So like I had like physical impact on my body from that, which like part of, I don't want to like go too much into like sciencey talk, but part of
I love it.
Trauma response is shaking. And like part of the experience of being like chronically flooded, like our system being overloaded, is our body will tremble. And it's also part of discharging trauma when we feel safe. So it can be confusing. It's like a response to like, I know you've been in intense, overwhelming situations relationally that were traumatic.
Yeah.
But like, you know, I've been in them too. And like you will shake afterwards. Like your body is like trembling and your hands shake. And I'm like, this feels so similar to how I would manifest, which was so interesting. Like that was the only other way my body thought about what that sensation was like.
Yeah, I know. When I look back at the manifestations, sometimes people ask, is there anything that you can't explain? And I'm always like, I don't know. I don't know. I did manifest. I don't really know what it was about. Mm-hmm. I do remember while it was happening, I would have thoughts of like, was it real? And then now my body's keeping it going, because you're doing this repetitive movement for like 8 or 9 hours the first time that I started. And then I didn't like want it to stop because I had prayed for it so much. And I do remember having these thoughts in the back of my mind where I was like, am I making this happen? Am I doing this myself? But then I woke up in the middle of the night and I had a dream. I had prayed for somebody and then I started manifesting again. But I don't know if that is just because my brain made the connection from prayer and healing to that movement. Like it's very interesting to look at cult documentaries and see. I still would like to do more research on it because I don't really know how to explain it, but I do feel like there's something to that for sure.
And I'm curious if there's research too that's been done on like that connection between the prayer and the movement. I also think Bethel drew so many neurodivergent folks. I'm like, most of us were all just like stimming. Like we're all just doing repetitive motions like to regulate our nervous systems, and then we all do it together. Like I just think that's part of what was happening too.
There was a lot going on.
A lot. But
so as a therapist, what do you find to be really helpful in healing from religious trauma?
Yeah. So, like I said in my story, like that disillusionment piece of kind of realizing like, oh, these experiences were harmful for me. I think that's the biggest first step, is like putting some of those puzzle pieces together of experiencing like the harm that was done, of like, this wasn't all good. We often have, when we're first kind of waking up to that, an experience of like, oh, this was all bad. And that can be really confusing because usually our experience had good parts of it or we would have left. Like there are reasons we stayed. There was a sense of belonging. There was that like group experience of being in worship that was so powerful. Mm-hmm. There was, spiritual experiences, energy, like whatever, however we think about it now, like there were parts that were like resources for us during that time. But I think when we're first kind of being disillusioned, coming out of that fog of like the community, really realizing the harm that was done is important. And seeing how that harm then like impacted our belief system, like that interplay of like, oh, these beliefs, actually some of them like are inherently harmful, and some of them got like co-opted. Like it's not a bad belief, but it was co-opted in a way to like control me or like get me to do certain things for the community or follow a certain set of rules. And so that like deconstruction piece I think comes soon after, of kind of reorienting ourselves to what's true, what's not, what do I believe, what, kind of like a distinction too between like me and the community of like what actually is me, what is actually my truth, and what did I just believe because that's what I had to believe to survive in that place. I think that's a huge part of healing.
Because I think a lot of people, they say, how could you have believed these things? They're so outlandish and stuff, people looking from the outside in. But I like what you said about trying to figure out, what do I think? Because I think that that's a part that's broken when you're in these sorts of atmospheres. Like it felt like when you see everybody manifesting and they're telling you that this is what should happen when the fire of God comes upon you or whatever, you just start to accept all of these group experiences and these group beliefs. And yeah, it's just hard to distinguish what do you actually believe in these atmospheres, because it's kind of like you have to adjust or what, I don't know. You kind of get in line, and when you're in a room and everybody believes the same thing, then you're gonna steer that way, especially if you're being told that these people are prophets and they're hearing directly from God. Totally. So I'm going to trust their discernment more than my own discernment. Mm-hmm. So like coming out of it, yeah, it's hard to try to figure out who am I apart from all of this and all 100%. Of what I've been told is the right and wrong thing to do.
Yeah, and I think it's important to validate like the good parts of the experience. Like we did, there was a reason we stayed, and actually Steve Porges, who was the creator of polyvagal theory, which is like a somatic nervous system based theory in psychology. If you've heard of it, if you hadn't, it doesn't matter. But he did a research study on people who have been in part of cults, and he studied their nervous system states, and their most of the people were in the ventral vagal state, which ventral vagal is like what we commonly think of as like rest and digest. So it's where we're like connected, we're comfortable, we can be sitting on the couch, but we can easily like get up to answer the door. Like there's this like, we're not collapsed, but we're also not like that keyed up fight or flight energy. Like it's kind of what should be our baseline. And it's where we can most easily enter that like connection relational pathway. And so, when he studied this, it's so fascinating that most of the time when people were in cults, they were activated in that ventral vagal pathway. They had like connection to meaning and purpose, connection to people, connection to community. They were like relaxed. And then there was a certain point where an experience would happen where they'd start to question, am I safe? Am I actually safe here? And that's where they'd go into more of the sympathetic, the fight or flight, or the freeze, fawn states. Yeah. And so I think that was like so validating for me to read that research, and for so many of my clients, because like there were experiences that communicated safety and belonging for us in those spaces. Even if we were being harmed, our brains weren't aware fully of that harm until maybe we had, kind of like I did with Chad, like that wake up experience of like, oh, this isn't as safe as I thought. This isn't, there isn't emotional room for me here, and maybe I should have a boundary or have my guard up. And then we kind of shift into that state. So yeah.
That's really cool. I obviously didn't know about that. Yeah.
So, and I think another important part of the healing process is like making space to grieve. So grieving the time lost we spent there, grieving the choices we made there, grieving even the harm that we've caused, being leaders, perpetuating the themes or the violence of these ministries, the messages, and also grieving like the missed developmental experiences. I think that was a big part of my process and part of what I walk clients through, even if, especially those with who are raised in extreme purity culture, is like, oh, I didn't get to like date the boy I liked, I had a crush on. Like I didn't get to have these like physical or sexual experiences kind of in age appropriate times. Like I still feel so young in these ways, even though I'm in my 30s or even my 50s. Like I'm stuck, or my marriage is impacted now because of what I experienced as a teenager because of purity culture. And so I think having like making room and validating the need for grief when we're healing from spiritual trauma or from purity culture is so necessary, because it allows us to like orient ourselves appropriately to the harm that happened.
Yeah. That way you can fully recognize it. Mm-hmm. I think I've just gotten so many stories. I know like purity culture can hit so many aspects of your life, and it doesn't end the second you get married. The amount of even friends that I've had who they get married, and I really do think, I'm all for people doing what they want to do. So if somebody wants to wait until marriage, that is fine. But in these cultures where it's extreme purity culture and you're not doing anything before marriage, I would imagine it would be jarring to go from like holding hands, kissing, and then having sex in like a very few hour period. Mm-hmm. And that's jarring. And I've just heard from so many people that they spent a lot of their honeymoons crying, or their entire identity was wrapped up in their purity. And then they're like, who even am I now that I guess I'm not pure anymore? This thing that was such a core value. I think there's just so many layers to that entire belief system that bleed into so many aspects of life.
100%. Yeah. And I think, one thing I've thought about a lot in my own process is just like the box that purity culture gave me, and how sexuality just really isn't in a box. And like, we got this version of like, here's this little wrapped up box, and you just like keep it safe until you get married, and then you can open it, and that box looks like heteronormativity and like cisgender, and like only inside of marriage, and like only in these certain ways, like no kinks, or it's like just this nice little package. And sexuality is a spectrum, and we all fall on different parts of it, and we all have different things that stimulate us, or activate desire, and different fantasies, and like that is so limited in purity culture that I think there's this reality of when we grow up in that and we do wait, it's like we've shut down and turned off like physiologically our sex drive for so much of our lives, to then expect it to be on all the time, or like ready
24/7
or like even that it's going to be easy to orgasm, or even like easy to become pregnant. Fertility stuff too is tied to this. And so I think there's so many layers, and I have so many friends who like didn't know they were queer until they came out of all of this, and then actually had permission to recognize this part of themselves that like was so demonized and was so just like the worst thing you could possibly do in Christian culture and Christian environments. Like, of course that wouldn't be a part of your psyche. Like, it would be hidden from your psyche, hidden from your conscious mind, that this is like a part of your expression of self. And, that's no matter what sexual preference you have, like, it's so sad to be cut off from our sexuality, because it truly is connected to our aliveness. And I think that's been like a huge part of my healing, is like doing somatic work, which is essentially just embodiment work, seeing my sexuality as an expression of my aliveness. It is not this other part of me that is like only for sex. It's not this like piece that just comes out when I'm horny. Like, it is connected to my creativity. It's connected to when I move my body, when I work out, it's connected to my sleeping. It's like, it is me. My sexuality is me. And I think that is something that I still feel so much grief over, is that like that part of me got cut off and forgotten and abandoned for so long. And I'm still like learning her. I'm still like getting to know what she likes, what she doesn't like, and to be in your 30s, like figuring that out for the first time is scary. It's intimidating and can make you feel like imposter syndrome, or even just like kind of despair of like, oh, I don't even know what I like or what I prefer, and
grief of the time lost.
Totally.
I liked what you were saying about the age appropriate progression, because that's a personal belief that I have, is that, it's sad when you don't get to have those experiences, when everything is just so shut down. And I wanted to ask you, I know that you're not an EMDR therapist, but okay, so I have this very weird experience, and I wanted to share it because I'm like, who knows, maybe someone else has also experienced this, but I have a lot of trauma, obviously, from TED, and then I was also sexually abused when I was younger. So I went to a therapist who did EMDR therapy, and it was a while back, so I don't remember exactly what we did. Like, we created a safe place, and then they kind of like take you through the memory, and then they ask you like, what came up with, if I remember it correctly. I just remember feeling like I hated it, because it was very much like, close your eyes and like, what do you see? What do you feel? And it triggered me so bad, because it reminded me of Bethel, of the prophetic. So for those of you not in these circles, one thing that Bethel would do would demand us to give prophecies on demand, because they would say that God is always talking, And if you don't hear anything, just listen, because he always has something to say to Sam. Always. Why would he not have something to say to Sam? So it's this very performative, anxiety-inducing thing. And I remember going to so many Bethel birthdays and trying to leave early because we would popcorn prophesy over the birthday girl or birthday boy. And I found it horrible. I absolutely hated it. And when I went to the Banovs as well, they had me write up 60 prophetic words based on a list of names.
Like people you didn't know.
No, I've never met these people. And looking back at the prophetic words that I had given before, I think I was absolutely picking up on energy, picking up on what I thought about these people. And, to have a list of names, I have nothing to work off of. I don't know how old these people are. I don't know anything about them. And that's the moment where I became disillusioned with prophecy, where I felt like I'm faking it. Yeah, like
just making shit up.
I'm making shit up. It's so funny. One time I asked ChatGPT if I could give me 60 prophetic words. God. And I was like, oh my God, it shot it out in like 5 seconds. I'm like, these are perfect. I should have if this was around back then.
But also I'm like, that's so scary thinking about the Sean Bowles and, just like using chat.
Yeah, I could be getting his tips from there. But yeah, I found the whole thing very triggering when they were like, imagine or tell me what's coming up. And I think I constantly had this fear of Bethel where I was like, I'm not hearing anything, or I was afraid that I would say something wrong. Yeah. Or like, what if I step out in faith and that's actually not what that person's into? Or what if it could be fact checked and I'm just wrong and that's embarrassing and humiliating and who knows, maybe you're not prophetic. So being put on the spot to imagine something was like very triggering for me. But I wish I could have the benefits of EMDR because I've heard such positive things about it.
Right. And the thing with therapy, there's so many modalities. Well, first of all, I'm sorry you had that experience. Like it sucks to like finally go to therapy and then be triggered. Like, the worst. I have been in very therapeutic settings and also gotten very triggered, which I can share more about. But I think EMDR is a modality that's like very intense. Like I almost equate it with like using psychedelics to do trauma work because you're kind of in that, like, it feels very similar to that type of spirituality where you're like very out of your body and like you're in the image channel. You're like, you're working with traumatic memory. That's in that like imagery way. And I say that because the way that I work with traumatic memory, being a somatic therapist, is we always start with the body. So EMDR, it would be what's like a top-down modality. So you're starting with the brain and like memories and thoughts, and then you're maybe getting into like emotion and sensation from there. Whereas somatic is bottom up. So we're starting with the body, and then we'll maybe get into like, we're starting with sensation, we'll maybe get into emotion, and then maybe we'll start to touch into like memory and thoughts and messages about that. But the reason we start with the body is that actually can connect. It's like you can move through the body memory without actually having to like reprocess or like remember in your brain what happened. Yeah. And that can be, it's like so much gentler and so much like, it feels like this big versus like this, but like we were talking about that big cathartic flooding experience. That is not what we want in somatic therapy. Like slow is fast in somatic therapy. Like we want the slowest, the most titrated. Like I'm always checking in, like, where are you at? Are you feeling triggered? Okay, then we're going to back off. Like it's just dip a toe in. And then as you build that kind of capacity for more sensation, for that kind of a sensation, then that's where like healing is happening. So like I had an experience of being on a retreat with someone who I adore, Dr. Hillary McBride. She does I have a stack of books that I can share if you want resources, but
we can do that at the end. But she just wrote a book on spiritual trauma. She writes a lot on embodiment. She's a researcher,
PhD therapist, all things. So like fully trust her. Like went on this retreat, like I am not nervous at all. Like she is a safe person. I really trust her. So we do this like sound bowl singing time, and it's spontaneous song, which any of you have been to Bethel, and as Julie knows, this is like,
I'm like, that would trigger me so bad.
I got so triggered, and I was like, dang it,
absolutely.
I like, love this retreat, and holy shit, like something in me was just like, run for the hills, red alert, this is not safe, because it was just that auditory, like different people singing different things at the same time that was just like put me back in the sanctuary at Bethel. It was so wild how quickly I was back there. And so like I know enough about my nervous system and how to like source safety because I'm a somatic therapist that I like left the room, and I was in the kitchen, so I was like close enough I could still kind of hear it, but I let my body go, hey, you're further away. Do you want to go outside? Yeah. Like I just kept giving myself choices. Do you want to go outside so you can't hear? Do you want to put your headphones in so you block it out? And I just kind of like listened to what felt safe enough. So like I'm close enough to the trigger to still maybe feel some sensation. Like I don't have to totally shut down, but I also like feel safe enough and like I have a choice where I could leave at any point. And I just kind of like let myself get comfortable there. And then eventually I was like able to go back, and I like sang a little bit and it felt okay. And then I got overwhelmed. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to leave again. And like, I just gave myself so much permission and choice, because that's what I felt like was my experience at Bethel. The thing that got taken was like, we stay in the room till God shows up, and you can't, I mean, I remember times like having to go to the bathroom.
And scream to someone's chest, you know?
Yeah. But I remember like worship times when I had to go to the bathroom, but I'm like, I can't leave because what if something happens, you know, like just ignoring all of your body's cues. So yeah, like I'm curious for you if maybe starting with like more of a somatic modality or something that would kind of like be slower and gentler and not
my friend is really into somatic stuff. Like she's read a lot of books and stuff about that, and I've been wanting to look into it because I feel like maybe that would be more my vibe. And I'm also, I have this this is such a tangent, okay? But I have this very weird thing where my body will make up pain, okay? So it's very strange. I've read this, what was that book? Healing Back Pain. So I forgot who it was, but TMS, does that ring a bell? Anyway, basically what he was saying is that like trauma, you know, can be stored in the body. Also, the body keeps the score, like that whole kind of vibe, which I've read that book.
Which is somatic therapy. Like that is like, like
so I'm like, I feel like that's how my body works. And I had this running injury where I was training for a marathon, and I'm such a type A person. And in this Healing Back Pain book, he said that people who are type A and like kind of stressed out, they often experience this. And I was training for the marathon. I ended up I injured my hip, and it was so weird. I've never had pain there in my entire life, and it didn't go away for like 4 months. And it was just lingering, and I had no idea why that pain was there, and I couldn't run, and I was just in a stress spiral of, oh my gosh, if it doesn't get better by now, then I'm not going to be able to run the marathon. I already did this, you know, and it was like so in my head. And then I found that book, and he basically said, you need to tell your body that it's not real, because he said, if you have an injury that has been lasting a very long time, like bones heal, you know, bones heal, injuries heal. And if you have an injury that, you know, and obviously use your judgment, but if you have an injury that didn't necessarily make sense, that seems kind of unexplainable, it might be this fake pain that your body is using for trauma to kind of like process through things. Right. So he said to tell your mind that it's not real, like this is not a real injury, and I'm safe and my body's whole. And within like 2 days, my pain was completely gone.
Wild.
So I know I experienced that. I know my body does this like very weird thing. So I feel like my emotions and my body are very highly connected.
Yeah, which we all are. I think some of us are, you know, we've learned to turn it off, or like learned that the way to get love and belonging is to be in our rational mind, so we disconnect from our body, or been in religious spaces where we do that, are encouraged to do that. I think my caveat to what you said, which I know it's like your interpretation of this guy's book, but how I think about like when trauma happens, that trauma energy or like survival energy, so what our body wants to do to protect us from the trauma, can get stored in the body. And so what happens in somatic therapy is like we actually let the body do what it didn't get to do, what it wasn't allowed to do, what it was trapped and couldn't actually, you know, do to protect us in that traumatic moment in order to move that trauma or survival energy out of our body. And so like if you fell, I mean, I literally processed my concussion in somatic therapy. If you fell and your arm, like when you're in that place, you want to come up and protect your head, you let the body do that in a therapy session with a safe witness. And in that way, you're actually reprocessing the trauma without having to like recite to the therapist everything that happened and recall the memory in your mind. You're just letting your body express how it wanted to protect you. And then that survival energy leaves. And so pain goes away, your nervous system state changes, you actually have access to safety again. And so I wonder if like somehow knowing this information from this book for you allowed you to like release that trauma energy, that survival state that was stuck there in your hip.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I wanted to know, do you have any book recommendations? I'm sure you have like a long list, and I can put some of them in the show notes too.
Yes. I do. So for those of folks who resonate, or you Jubilee, if you haven't read any of these, with purity culture and growing up in that environment, and you're like healing from that, trying to kind of rebuild your idea of sexuality. I couldn't find my copy, but there's a book called Shameless by Nadia Bolz-Weber, I think, but she writes it from like a Christian context. So it's very much like about purity culture and some of the messaging. So like if you're kind of working through like creating a new ethic of sexuality or a new like belief system around sexuality, that's still from a Christian framework. Shameless is a great book. If you're just interested in, healing your sexuality, understanding it in a new way, especially for women. Come As You Are, which is by...
I love that book.
Yes, all of her research, especially when it comes to how stress impacts women's sexuality, is like so good. Like if you've ever dealt with disassociation or like chandeliering during sex, which is like you feel like you're up on the ceiling watching yourself have the experience, like her book is so helpful to know like what's your gas pedal with your sex drive, what are your brakes, like how to help that mental chatter when you're in a sexual experience to quiet down and actually like be in your body. That book is really, really helpful for that. For folks who are like, we're in evangelicalism and are like still navigating that, especially women, Katie Gaddini wrote this book called The Struggle to Stay, which is, she's a sociologist actually from my alma mater, and she, the subtitle is Why Single Evangelical Women Are Leaving the Church. And so it's a lot about like the messages and the injustice and just like the bullshit that women deal with in modern evangelicalism. And she studied Bethel, and she studied like another church in the UK, but she like met with young women. Like I think she interviewed Alyssa Quilala, Chris Quilala's wife.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like, it's close to us. Like it's close to our experience.
I need to read that because I feel like they would very much understand, you know, where we came from.
Yeah. I think it's very
for
validating. Sure. And then, as I mentioned, Dr. Hillary McBride, she has The Wisdom of Your Body, which is what I always recommend rather than The Body Keeps the Score, because I think unless you're going to be a therapist, The Body Keeps the Score can be really re-traumatizing because he shares a lot of trauma stories, and it's a lot. And so a lot of people try to read it and they're like, oh, it's so heady or it's overwhelming. The Wisdom of Your Body, like you'll get the same concepts, but it's so much more accessible, and she has like some great kind of like practices and things that you can like try on, some of these embodiment practices. So that one's on embodiment. And then she just came out with this one, again, Dr. Hillary McBride, called Holy Hurt, which is all about spiritual trauma. And she has a podcast by the same name, if you prefer that format. But what I wanted to share with you is, I don't know if you knew Will Matthews when we were at Bethel, but he was there at the same time. But I didn't know him, but I knew of him for sure. But he's friends with Hillary, so he tells his story in the podcast and the book, especially now that he's like
Wow.
an out and proud gay man. And so just like what it was like to be gay at Bethel and to be black and gay at Bethel and be in a leadership position is really beautiful to hear. He's also just like a brilliant like theologian and philosopher. So like hearing him, especially on the podcast, hearing him talk about his beliefs, like he's still involved in church, but in a very different way. And his process of spiritual trauma was like really healing for me. So highly recommend Holy Hurt, whether book or podcast version.
Oh, that's awesome. Yay. I'll have to make like thumbnails for the Instagram that'll have like all the books on there with the recommendations and everything.
Yeah, put it in the show notes or something.
Yes. And I think books helped me so much heal. Like I think that reading books during my last year of marriage really helped me leave.
Yeah.
I think like seeing that there was another way to view life and the world is kind of like what started that whole process of being able to understand my dynamic more. I read Come As You Are while I was married to Ted, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, oh.
It feels like a like liberatory book to read in that kind of marriage.
Yes. And I was like, oh, this is not my reality, you know, like to know that there's another way to see it, you know. But I liked it because it wasn't like overly offensive to me or anything like that, being somebody in the Bethel circle, like, because I was still kind of in it, you know, but it's very gentle in how it communicates all of those different principles.
and very research based. Like you're just like, oh, this is science, which I think is helpful. And then like I am a therapist. I have availability to work with individuals, so I can see folks for therapy in California virtually. And I'm also like an embodiment coach. So if you're out of the state of California, I can still work with you. It'll just look a little bit different, but pretty much the same. And then I have a group coming up in the fall. I'm not sure the dates yet, but on my website, I'll have like a link to a wait list. And I think I don't have like an official title yet, but I want to do something around spiritual trauma and embodiment. So if folks are listening and they want like a process group, but then we'll also do a lot of work creating like your own embodiment rituals that you can build into your spiritual practice or just your morning routine, whatever it is. I really want to create a space for people for that coming up in
That's amazing. Because I know so many people, they are wondering, I don't know, just coming out of these systems, what next? How do I like get back in touch with myself after these high control spaces? And not even just Christianity, but other religions too. I mean, it's a lot of the same in these high control spaces. Okay. So where can they find you? What is your handle and what is your website?
Yeah, so my website's SamanthaRedondotherapy.com. Redondo like Redondo Beach, the city. And my Instagram and my Substack are both at wild.reciprocity. I'm also a nature therapist. I didn't really talk about that a ton, but I do somatic nature therapy. And so that's kind of like the theme of my writings and groups on those spaces. But I also sometimes dip into some of the spiritual trauma stuff too. So
awesome. Yeah. So go check her out. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been so amazing. It's crazy that our paths crossed a million years ago. And, you know, just seeing how we were both able to kind of get out of this. And I love the work that you're doing now.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on. I love the work you're doing and that you're telling your story, healing out loud, and now like inviting other people to heal out loud too. It's so, so cool. So well done.
Thank you so much. It would mean a lot to me if you guys could leave a review. That would mean a lot to me. And I'm also launching a Patreon. It will probably be out by the time this episode comes out. So I know I read a lot of crazy stories on my TikTok and Instagram, but I'm going to be reading some of the longer ones that people have submitted to me because a lot of people will send me multiple paragraphs and it doesn't fit in a short form video. So I'll be talking about those sorts of stories and doing that on there, as well as just extra bonus content and Q&As. So that is it for this episode of Healedish, and I'll see you guys next week.